All right, Chavra, good morning. What an incredible schus, Baruch Hashem, it is to be able, first of all, a tremendous yashkach to Maishi for the magnificent chakras. And a shkoyach to Josh Rosenblum for the Kriya, Bar Mitzvah boy, Bar Mitzvah Bachar, shkoyach. And a tremendous shkoyach to Avron. Where's Avron? Avron leave? Okay, Avron's around. Mamish, to be Gabai in Marsa Machpelah is a resume builder. Incredible. So, Chavra, again, it's a great zuchos. Baruch Hashem, to be able to learn the daf here today. So, our daf today is sponsored by, I forgot the sponsorships over the last couple of days. So our daf today is sponsored by Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat. Bracha Strimber in memory of her husband Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi Zichron Levracha, Ayal and Sarah Steinberg, and the Schus of Refuah Shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha. And our week of learning sponsors Mark and Elsa Lussman in honor of the Yarchei Kalo, and the Refuah Shlema for Kol Cholei Yisrael. All right, I will say with that, what a schus it is, Baruch Hashem, to learn in this incredible and overwhelming place. The schus that we have to be able to learn Torah each and every day is obviously immeasurable, and the schus we have to learn here in the proximity of our parents, proximity of Yaakov and Leah, is beyond words. Let us hope that in Yirtzeh Hashem, our tefillos and our Torah give our parents a healthy dose of nachos. So we'll say we are picking up, today's daf is Yud Zayin 17, and we are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem on Tes Zayin Amud Beis 16b, and we left off 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom. So let's see, remember again, we left off with a profound yisodistic machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Specifically, again, as the Mishnah just mentioned, that remember the Mishnah was dealing with the case of a person who takes a neder nazirus while standing in a cemetery. So the way the Mishnah phrased the halacha is that the Mishnah essentially said that halacha l'maisa, the days that he spends in the cemetery do not go ahead and count towards the neder nazirus. The Gemara deals, or the Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish deals with the more yisodistic question, which is, well, what's the nature of the neder? What's the impact of neder? How do we view the neder? Do we view it essentially as if the neder has taken effect, but yet the actualization of the neder was delayed until he leaves the cemetery? That's essentially Rabbi Yochanan. Neder chala alav, he becomes a Nazir. Or do we say like Reish Lakish, Ein Naziros Chala Alav? Reish Lakish essentially says, no, you're not a Nazir. You're not a Nazir. Right? You can't become a Nazir while standing in a cemetery. They both say, what's the nafkamina? What's practical difference between these two approaches? Practical difference is when you leave the cemetery and then ultimately again are metaher yourself, do you need to re-accept the neder nazirus or not? According to Rabbi Yochanan, absolutely not. According to Reish Lakish, absolutely yes. So let's go. Eis veis, Gemara is the kasha. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan is kasha to Reish Lakish. Misha nazar vu b'veis hakvara. So we'll say, so again, Rabbi Yochanan says that even when you take a neder nazirus in a cemetery, that neder is chal. The neder works. So Reish Lakish says, no, it doesn't. So Rabbi Yochanan asks the kasha on Reish Lakish. Somebody became a Nazir and he was standing in the cemetery. Even if he was standing there for 30 days, ultimately, again, the days he stays in the cemetery do not count towards the neder naziros. Ve'eno maybe carbon tuma. And furthermore, again, he does not bring a carbon. In other words, he doesn't bring a carbon as if he was a Nazir who became tameh. Who became tameh? So the Gemara says, what can you infer from here? Carbon tuma hu delo maisi. What you can infer from here is he doesn't bring a carbon tuma. That's right, he doesn't bring a carbon. Ha mechel chayile alei. I will say what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is the fact that the Mishnah has to say that it doesn't bring a carbon tuma. That statement is only necessary if what? If you hold that he has become a Nazir. Because if he hasn't become a Nazir, then it's not a shayla. Of course he's not bringing a carbon tumah. So the fact that it has to say he doesn't bring a carbon tumah tells us that ultimately, again, the neder nazirus was in fact chal on him. So Amar Lei, Reish Lakish would respond, no. Eino b'toras tumah, ve'eino b'toras karba. No, what it means to say is he's not shaykh to ultimately again the halachos of tumah, and therefore by definition he does not bring a carbon tumah. So Reish Lakish will say that's what it means when it says eino maybe carbon. It means that he's not shaykh to the halachos of tumah. Why? Because the neder nazirus did not devolve upon him at all. Ace says, Gemara is another kasha. Mishaya tamei v'nazar. somebody who was tamei, and then took upon himself an neder nezirus. So what's the halacha? Asur legaleach v'lishtos yayin. Ultimately, again, he can't go ahead and take a haircut, nor is he permitted to go ahead and drink wine. So again, I just want to point out over here, this is a situation, this could be Beis Akbar, this could be any case, where the person is tamei, but he takes upon himself a neder nezirus while in a state of tumah. So what's the halacha? He's not allowed to take a haircut, he's not allowed to drink wine for the tamei l'meisim, and he's not allowed to become tamei to the dead. V'im gilach v'shasa yayin, but if he took a haircut or he drank wine, v'nitba l'meisim, or he became tamei for the dead, harei sofek esar boim, he gets malchus. That was he gets malchus. So again, what essentially have we said over here? We've said over here that a person who is tamei takes on a neder nezirus. If he drinks wine or becomes tamei again, he gets malchus. Now, both says Rabbi Yochanan, I amrit b'shlama chayla haynu tamei d'sofek esar boim. So Rabbi Yochanan says, listen, if you hold that even when a person is tamei, if he takes on a neder nezirus, ultimately again that neder is chal, then it makes sense that what? That he'll get malchus for cutting his hair, drinking wine, who become tamei l'meisim. Eli amrit lo chayla. But if you hold Reish Lakish, that when if you're tamei and you become a Nazir, that the neder does not devolve upon you, then ultimately again, why would you get malchus if the neder was not chal? It's a good kasha. Both say top of Yud Zayin. Reish Lakish would respond, what's the case here? Biyotze v'nichnas. The case of Rabbi says where what? Where the guy took on his neder neziros in the cemetery, and then what? And then what? And then he left. And then he left. Okay. So once you leave already, we'll say, what happens once you leave? Even Reish Lakish would agree that Allah Lamaisa, once you leave, there's room for the actual neder to now devolve upon the individual. So the Gemara says, Eisvei, so Rabbi Yochanan is not finished. Eisvei, ein bein tamei shen nazir, le nazir tamei shenitma. So Rabbi said, this is an interesting formulation. This is in tomorrow's daf. This is Mishnah in tomorrow's daf. The Mishnah says, there is no distinction between a tamei shen nazir. Tamei shen nazir means a person who is already tamei, who seeks to take upon himself a neder nezirus. There's no distinction between him to a person le-nazir tahar shenitma. What's a nazir tahar shenitma? So this is a person who was a regular nazir, and then what? Became tamei. What's the distinction between the two? Ella, 3 lines out from the top, Yitzhak Amud Aleph. Ella, tamei shenazir. So here's the difference, that if a person was already tamei, and then took upon himself an neder nezirus, shvi'i shelo ola lo leminyan. His 7th day of purification ultimately counts towards the count of his neder nezirus. Interesting Allah. We'll see this tomorrow. Right? So we'll say, the 7th day of your purification process counts as day number 1 of the nezirus count. The nazir tamei shenitma, but Allah again, if a nazir, regular nazir, was who a star, and then became tamei, so now he has to go through a purification process. Ein shvi'i shalo ola lo leminyan. His 7th day of purification does not count towards his 30-day nezirus. I says the Gemara chayla, and if you hold this is Rabbi Yochanan asking Reish Lakish, if you hold that Allah Maisa nezirus is not chal at all when you take it upon yourself in a state of tumah, then ultimately, again, why would it count? Why would day number 7 count as part of the neder nezirus if nezirus is not chal upon you when you are tamei? So Amar Rav Ashi. So let's listen to this. Amar Rav Ashi has a different version of this. He holds meichol koli amalo pligi dechayla. So we'll say Amar Rav Ashi is coming along and reframing the machlokes. He says no. Everyone agrees. Rabbi Yochanan agrees, and even Reish Lakish agrees that what? When you are standing in the cemetery and you say Hareini Nazir, Rabbi will say, what happens when you're standing in the cemetery and you say Hareini Nazir? What happens? You're a Nazir. Now again, you're a Nazir, we'll call it you're a non-practicing Nazir. Right? Because you can't practice, because so everyone agrees that the neder nezirus is chal. Ela ki pligi. So Rabbi will say, ultimately against what do they argue about? It's very interesting. Lemalki. Rabbi will say, here's the interesting question. Do you get malchus? So imagine for a moment that this Nazir is standing in the cemetery, were then to go ahead and either delay in the cemetery, cut his hair, drink wine. Ultimately, again, would there be a chiyuv malchus in this situation? So listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan Savar, Kevan dechayli loki. Rabbi Yochanan holds, listen, since the neder Nazirus was chal on the individual, therefore by definition he will get malchus for any Nazirite infraction. Reish Lakish says, lo loki v'chayla. Reish Lakish says, I'll agree that the neder Nazirus ultimately is chal, but Allah Chalamaysa, you will not go ahead and get malchus for any type of violation of the neder Nazirus. Incredible, I will say. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan asks Chashvei Reish Lakish. So we'll say, so now what we've just done is we've reframed the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So beforehand, we thought the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish was what? Whether or not the neder Nazirus is chal upon you when you're standing in a cemetery. Now the Gemara is suggesting, no. Everyone agrees that when you're standing in a cemetery, what happens? The neder Nazirus is chal. You are a Nazir. So what's the machlokes? The machlokes is whether or not you will get malchus for Nazir infractions while still standing in a cemetery. Right? So again, you cut your hair, you go out and you drink wine. Will you get malchus ultimately for those infractions? Or we'll see, by the way, even you delay in your tumah. Will you get malchus? Rabbi Yochanan says yes. Reish Lakish says no. So here we go. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan is Chashvei Reish Lakish. Misha Nazir hu b'veisak varas. Mishnah said, somebody becomes a Nazir and he's standing in the cemetery. Afilu hayasham shloshim yom, even if he stands there for 30 days, in olun lo min haminyan. Those 30 days do not count to the duration of his neder Nazirus. Ve'eno mevi karban tumah, nor does he bring a karban tumah. To which Rabbi Yochanan refers, karban tumah u'delo ma'isi. He doesn't bring a karban for his tumah, but ha milka lucky. But I will say, what does Rabbi Yochanan say? He does get malchus. He does get malchus were he to do something wrong. So to which the Gemara says, "Bidinhu delisni eino loke." Reish Lakish should respond, no. In reality, the Mishnah should say that they don't really even get malchus. They don't get malchus. Ela mishum de kabay lemisna seifa yatsa v'nichnas olam min haminyan. I will say, but rather this was just to preserve Mishnaic symmetry. Since the end of the Mishnah said that what? That if you go out and you come back in, then the clock does start. So maybe karban tumah, and you do bring a karban tumah. Tana Reisha eno maybe karban tumah. Therefore, just for Mishnaic symmetry, the Reisha says you don't bring a karban for tumah as well. But eno chinami, it's quite possible. Reish Lakish says that you wouldn't get malchus for anything. Okay, Tashma. So we'll say we're still in this machlokes. So Tashma, ein bein tamei she Nazir le Nazir tar she nitma. There is no distinction between a tamei who made a neder Nazirus versus a person who is tahar, right? A Nazir who was tahar and then became tamei. Ella she tamei she Nazar shvi'i shala ololo min haminyan. But I will say, but what? But rather, again, in general, if a tamei became a Nazir, his seventh day of purification counts as part of the count of his neder Nazirus. However, if a Nazir tar shenitma, but a Nazir tar becomes tameh, ein shvi'i shala olam min haminyan. His seventh day does not count as part of the count. However, what can you infer from here? Halamalkis zev zeh shavin. Rabbi say, but for Malchus, they both will be chayiv. So again, this seems to be a proof to Rabbi Yochanan. A question on Reish Lakish. Amarlei lo letaglachas zev zeh shavin. However, the Amarlei lo letaglachas zev zeh shavin. In terms of hair cutting, both will be the same. Aval le'inyan malchus mai. What about from Malchus? Zeh loke v'zeh eino loke. Ultimately, and I will say the Nazir who became tamei will get malchus. Who was tamei became tamei will get malchus. But ultimately, again, the Nazir who took his neder Nazirus while tamei will not get malchus. If that's the case, listen, why doesn't the Mishnah say that? Rosa is incredible. Bitakanta kamairi, bikilkula lo kamairi. The Mishnah is focused, I will say, on ultimately positive steps towards affirming Nazirus, not on ultimately, again, mistakes in Nazirus. Incredible. Tashma, Mishay Tameh v'Nazir, somebody was Tameh and he became a Nazir, Astra legaleach v'lishtos yayin. He's not permitted to take a haircut, nor is he permitted to drink wine. V'im gilach v'shasa yayin, but if he did take a haircut, and he drank wine, or v'nitma l'mesim, or he engaged in further tumah, harei zeh sofek es ha'arbaim. Ultimately, again, he should get malchus. Now, both say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that even halacha l'meisa, that what? If the Nazir is already tamei, but what? He subjects himself to tumah again. What's going to be the halacha? What's the halacha? He gets malchus. Rabbi say this seems to support whose opinion, Rabbi Yochanan, and seems to refute Reish Lakish, to which the Gemara says, Einachinami tiyufta. Tiyufta. This indeed would refute Reish Lakish's position, and halacha l'maisa, you would get malchus for further tumah, even if you're already tamei. Therefore, Rabbi say, we'll see the Rambam in just a little bit, but based on what we have just learned, we can say the following. Number one, everyone is going to agree that when you take upon yourself a neder nezirus in a cemetery, what happens? The neder is chal. That's number one, and everyone seems to be agreeing with that right now. Number two, I will say, based on what we just said, halacha l'maisa, if you were to now, again, number two, based on that, but when does the count for your neder nezirus actually begin? When does it begin? When you leave the cemetery, and obviously after the purification process. Not only that, but halacha l'maisa, day number 7 could potentially count as part of your neder nezirus as well. What happens if when in the cemetery you go ahead and violate further restrictions of nezirus, you cut your hair, you drink your wine, you expose yourself to another source of tumah? What's the halacha? Malchus. That's what the Gemara seems to be coming out over here, like Rabbi Yochanan on all levels. Rabbi Yochanan is also a very profound piece of hashkaf on this, which is it's interesting. You'll say to yourself, the Nazir Tameh, also listen to this, because this is hashkaf l'maisa. The Nazir Tameh, who's already Tameh, what's the halacha? If he exposes himself to another form of tumah, what's the halacha? The Gemara seems to, what's the halacha? He gets malchus. We'll say, what do you see from here? Sometimes a person says, you know what? I'm already broken. I'm already tameh. I'm already shivrei kelim. I'm already on the bottom of the bottom, the lowest of the low. So what does it matter what I do? But Elamai Rabbi say, what do you see from this? What does Rabbi Yochanan teach us? Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that even if you're tameh, maybe you're tameh, but the truth is, the Jew is never the lowest of the low. That's why that's what it means. Why is it that if I expose myself to further tumah, this malchus? Because even when I think that I'm the lowest of the low, I'm not. I'm not the lowest of the low. There's, as Rabbi Nachman says, Ein shum yeyosh ba'olam klal. A Jew is never permitted to give up on himself. That's why, again, you could never just say, I'm already tameh. Right? Who cares? I'm already broken. Who cares? No, we all make mistakes in life. But even when you make mistakes in life, you have not abdicated your residual tara. Your residual tara always remains within you. Your residual goodness always remains a part of you. And that's why even if you're tameh, you're still not allowed to subject yourself to any additional forms of tumah. This Rav Kook, Rav Yitzchak Kohen Kook again says this was the whole idea of the Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag by Purim, but he says that by Purim, by Chanukah, by the Pach Shemen. What's the whole miracle of the Pach Shemen? The whole miracle of the Pach Shemen says that no matter how much you mess up in life, there is always a little jug of spirituality. Munach b'chosamo shal Kohen Gadol. Literally, again, with the stempel, with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, that represents your untainted spirituality that is always, forever a piece of you. About Hashkacha, we're talking about Pach Shemen. We're right by Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu goes back for the Pachim Kitanim. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, you know what the Pachim Kitanim are? The Pachim Kitanim are the little droplets, little nitzotzos of Kiddusha that ultimately remain within each of us. Yaakov Avinu went back for the Pachim Kitanim because sometimes in life we forget about the Pachim Kitanim. We forget about the fact that we only focus on our mistakes. And we forget that no matter how many terrible mistakes we make in life, each of us has the Pach Shemen, each of us has the Pachim Kitanim, each of us has the little pockets of beautiful holiness and spirituality which still reside inside of us. That no matter how badly I mess up in life, it's there. And because I have the Pach Shemen, because I have the Pachim Kitanim, that gives me the ability, the springboard and the platform for personalistic, comprehensive, cathartic tshuva. Because if I didn't have good left inside of me, there would be nothing to rebuild with. Incredible. Explicit in the Gemara. Daf Yomi Nazir. Okay, let's go weiter. We'll see the Ram in just a little bit. Boy Rava answers the following Shaila. Nazir. Buvei sakvaros. Mahu. Boss isn't this. A person is a Nazir, and now he's in the cemetery. Mahu. What's talach? Rabbi said, now this is an interesting Shaila. Shabbos says, so listen to this. So if you take a look Okay, let's actually go weiter. We'll go weiter. So Nazir Beis Akvaras Mao. So Boishi Lamalkus Olo. Shabbos say this is an interesting halacha. If a person is in the Beis Hamikdash, actually, if you take a quick look at the rush. Rush on the left-hand column, last line in the rush. This is actually fascinating. So listen to this. Boishi Lamalkus Shir Shem Fureshes Lemishin Nitma Baones Ba'azara. So we'll say, listen to this. Somebody becomes tamei in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. So now, this is talking about a situation where, let's say again, I became tamei with an extenuating circumstance. Chas v'shalom, I'm in the Beis Hamikdash, in Meretz Hashem. Chas v'shalom, someone dies, right, and they fall on me, right? Literally, they fall back on me, right? So now that's called a tuma ba'ones, extenuating circumstances. I cannot have planned for that. So the Rush says, she'enu chayiv kares. I'm not chayiv kares because generally one is chayiv kares if they come into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tuma. I'm not chayiv kares, says the Rush. We'll say, just turn the page for just a moment. Unless I go ahead and I remain in the Beis Hamikdash, shir hishtachava. This is very interesting. So I will say, if you become tamei ba'ones, you're not immediately chayiv kares for being in the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. Rather, you're only chayiv if what? If you tarry. And how long do you have to tarry, delay? Shirish tachaba. The amount of time that it takes to prostrate yourself. Okay, so however long that is, it's not a lot of time. But the point over here is that if you recognize instantaneously, I'm Tommy, I got to get out of here, and you move yourself out, you're not chayiv for that. You're only chayiv if you delay, if you tarry. So therefore, Rabbi say, here's the shaila of Rava. So by Rava, Nazir b'veis hakvaras. So Rabbi say, if I'm a Nazir and I'm in the cemetery, Mao, what's the halacha? Boishi l'malkus alo. Is it the same halacha? In other words, we'll say, do we say that if you're a Nazir in the cemetery, boom, once you're there for a moment, that's it. You're done. And you're chayiv malkus or not? Or maybe, so do we say that once you're there instantaneously you're chayiv being malchus? Or maybe, just like the Azara, maybe you're only chayiv malchus if you're a Nazir that enters into the cemetery if what? If you tarry, if you delay, thank you, that's the better word than tarry. If you delay for a few minutes, to which the Gemara says, Ilema, so heichidam, what's the case? Ilema da amrile lo tinzar. So we'll say, ultimately, again, if the guy is in the cemetery and he's about to take a neder naziros, and we tell him what? Hey, don't do it. Essentially, Rabbi say, see, there's two ways to look at this shaila. This could be a Nazir who accidentally enters into a cemetery, right? He takes a wrong turn, right? So I'll say, again, we have sheikhs. They say, how can you take a wrong turn into a cemetery? Rabbi say, we just came from Tzas. You could easily take a wrong turn into a cemetery in Tzfas, right? Most of it is cemetery, right? So you could go ahead. I made a wrong turn. I was going down to the mikveh of the Arizal, right? Even for the Kohanically friendly pathway, I made a wrong turn. So that could be, or it could also be a case of where a guy's in the cemetery and he's about to say Hareini, and you know what he's about to say. And we tell him, don't do it. To which the Gemara says, if he got hasra, lamali shehiyah, then ultimately, again, then he should be instantaneously chayiv. To which the Gemara says, Nazir maitam lo b'shiyah, to kamasribe, hachinami kamasribe. We'll say, in general, a stam Nazir walks into a cemetery, right? Ultimately, again, he becomes chayiv instantaneously. Why? Because he has hasra. And I will say, where's his hasra? Because when he becomes a Nazir, we give him all of the halachos concerning being a Nazir. So therefore, he's chayiv. So if the guy is literally about to say, already Nazir, and we say to him, don't do it in a cemetery, then halacha l'maisa, he should be chayiv immediately. Ella, rather I will say, what's the case? Ella kigon is very interesting. Shenichnas b'shida teva umigdal uba chavero upara me'alav ma'aziva. So this is very interesting. You're a Nazir, and you have to go through a cemetery. So I say, how do you go through a cemetery? B'shida teva umigdal. What do? You go ahead and you're going in a covered carriage. And you know, what happens? Your friend decides to play a practical joke on you. And what does he do? There's always guys like this. What does he do, right? He pulls out the bottom of the carriage, right? Or exposes the bottom area of the carriage. So we'll say, now what's the problem? The problem is now the tumah olo bakas, right? Now you're exposed to tumah. So I will say, so what's uba chavero parami'alav ma'aziva? So I will say, so what's the halacha? So ki gemirin shehiyah bebeis hamikdash aval avroilo. So I will say, ultimately, again, do we say that the concept of shehiyah is a din by the mikdash? In other words, the concept of Osai that you're not instantaneously tamei is a din. Do we say that is dafka a din by the Beis Hamikdash? Aval avroi, but tuma outside of the mikdash, lo. Tuma outside of the Beis Hamikdash ultimately again is instantaneous. O dil maloshna. Or perhaps it makes no difference. Perhaps there is a din of shehiyah ultimately again wherever you are, be it the mikdash or be it the Beis Hakvaros, to which the Gemara says, teku. So I will say, so just do me a favor, keep the running list of questions we have, because maybe what we'll do is we'll save it on tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we'll have a little bit more time. We'll save the Rabbah Mirat Hashem for tomorrow. So just keep the list of running questions. Number one, can you become a Nazir in a cemetery itself? Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. It sounds like from that case, ultimately again, that you can. Everyone agrees that it's chal. Right? The next question is going to be, halacha l'maisa, if you violate, you do something violative. Is that a word, violative? It is now. Excellent. We're in Eretz Yisrael. I can speak any kind of English I want, right? Right? Violative, right? So ultimately, right? I'm sorry. Wikipedia, right? Right? I think violative. Menachem, you're legal counsel. No, violative. Sure. Okay, sure. That's good. I've even worn down legal counsel. This is mamish. This is very exciting. So. All right, so that's question one. Question number two, I'll say, is if you violate the Neder Nazirus, ultimately again while in the cemetery, do you get malchus or not? Okay, and I'll say question number three that we'll have to answer is halacha l'maisa. Let's say again you're in the cemetery now, you became a Nazir. Halacha, it is word. Right, excellent. Right, halacha l'maisa. Now you're in the cemetery. Do you instantaneously violate your Neder Nazirus? Or do we say that there's a din shia? Because in the Beis Hamikdash there is a din of shehiyah that you only are chayiv for tumah if halach lamaisa you remain for the amount of time that it takes to prostrate yourself. Does that din apply ultimately outside of the Beis Hamikdash as well? Fine. Another kasha. Bayra Rashi. Nazir b'Beis Hakvaros. If a person becomes a Nazir and he is in the Beis Hakvaros, so we'll say, once again, this is our Mishnah's case. I am a regular guy, I'm standing in a cemetery. I decide to become a Nazir inside of the Beis Hakvaros. So listen to this. Ta'un giluach olo. So I will say, does such an individual require a haircut or not? Now what does this mean? I will say, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Boy Rav Ashi, Nazir b'Beis Hakvaros ta'un giluach. Bayoma shvi'i shalo olo. So I will say, on the seventh day of purification, does the individual require a full shaving or not? To which the Gemara says, let's analyze. Ki bai taglachos. So I will say, now, again, what's the shaila? Just understand what the shaila is. In general, I'm a regular Nazir. So I will say, so what's the halacha if you become tamei? What's the halacha? 7 days purification and what? Full, right, karbanos, bird, full shaving, and you start again. You start everything again. So the shaila over here is our guy who became a Nazir in the cemetery, right? So now he's going to come out of the cemetery. What has to happen? Now remember, he doesn't count. He hasn't started his count. 7 days of purification. Now he's going to come out. What's the shaila? At the end of the 7 days of purification, does he now again? Is he chayv carbon? No. Right, that was the Mishnah. It's a 50-50, right? That was a no, right? No carbon. Saloch l'maisa now, is he chayiv giluach? That's the shaila. Is he chayiv giluach or not? So here's the shaila. So ki bai taglachos. I will say, do we say that when do you require a haircutting? Tar shenitma dekamatami l'nazirusei. Perhaps ultimately when is it that halacha l'maisa you require haircutting? You require haircutting if you are a Nazir tamei a Nazir tar who became tamei. The kamatami the Naziru say about tamei shenazar lo, but perhaps ultimately a Nazir who became a Nazir in a state of tumah, perhaps halacha l'maisa he does not require taglachas. O dilma loshna, or perhaps there is no distinction. Perhaps halacha l'maisa, whenever you are starting a neder nazirus in the aftermath of tumah, halacha l'maisa, you are going to go ahead and have to require hair cutting. So let's analyze. This is our last question for today. So Tashma, Misha Nazir b'Beis Hakvaros, if somebody took upon himself a neder nazirus and he's in the cemetery, afilu hayasham shloshim yom, even if he was there for 30 days, eino olalo min haminyan. It does not count for him as part of the tally for nazirus. Ve'eino mevi karban tumah. And halacha l'maisa, he does not have to bring a carbon tumah. To which the Gemara infers, Karban Tumo Hu Delo Maisi. It sounds like the only thing he doesn't have to do is what? Bring a Karban Tumo. Aval Giluche Boy. But maybe it sounds like over here that's what? He should require hair cutting. That he's no different than a Nazir Tahar Shenitma, that after he goes through his purification process requires again halacha l'maisi kiluach. So too the Nazir Tameh, or the Tameh Shenazar, ultimately again, the days in the cemetery don't count. When he comes out, 7 days of purity, no carbon, but it sounds like he should require a haircut. To which the Gemara says no. Matam kamar. Both say matam is a stylistic idea. What's the reason? Matam eno mevi carbon. Why is it that the Nazir in this case does not bring a carbon? Why? I'm sorry. Matam eno mevi carbon tuma mishum delo ba'i giluche. Ultimately, again, because he does not require haircutting. What the Gemara is suggesting is that maybe haircutting and carbon are intertwined. That halach l'maisa says since he's not chayv in any kind of shaving, therefore what? Halach l'maisa is not chayv in carbon as well. So let's say we haven't answered it. Tashma. Ein bein tamei shenazar linazir tar shenitma. There is no distinction between a person who was tamei and became a nazir to a person who was a nazir tahar and became tamei. Ella, here's a distinction. Ella, tamei shenazar shvi'i shala ololo min aminyan. Ultimately, you're going to say halach l'maisa. If you have a tamei, that's our Mishnah, the guy in the cemetery who became a Nazir, his seventh day of purification counts as day one of his Neder Nazirus. The Nazir tar shenitma, but a Nazir who was tar became Tameh, ein shvi'i shala ola lo min aminyan. His seventh day does not count as part of his, as his Neder Nazirus. To which the Gemara says, my love, halataglachas zev shabin. They will say, can't we infer from here that for what? That for hair cutting, it's the same, right? For hair cutting, halacha l'maisa, they're the same. And I will say in both cases, namely, the Nazir tahar shenitma. Everyone agrees across Rabbi say in that case, 7 days of purification. At the end of 7 days, then what? Hair cutting and carbon. So too again, the Nazir who becomes the Nazir in the Beis HaKvaras, he's going to come out 7 days of purification and hair cutting as well. To which the Gemara says, lo, halamalkus zev shabin. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Maybe what it means, Rabbi says, for malchus, that both of them will get malchus for violation of their Nazirite vow. Aval taglachas ma'ir. Also, when it comes to hair cutting, what's going to be the halacha? Ze migaleach, the Nazir tahar shenitma will require the hair cutting. V'ze eno migaleach. But this one, ultimately, again, the Nazir, or I should say, the tamei shenazar will not be required to take a haircut. If that's the case, listen ye. Why don't you say that in the Mishnah? Tana shvi'i shalal b'chol mili. Ultimately, I will say the Mishnah said the seventh day and everything, all of the halachos that accompany that seventh day. So therefore, I will say what the Gemara right now for this moment is suggesting is that halacha l'maisa. There is no haircut for the guy who became a Nazir inside of the cemetery. That for that individual, again, he has no obligation ultimately of any kind of hair cutting. Okay, so Rabbi say, so again, that's issue number 4 that we have to deal with, right? So now Rabbi say, the Nazir of our Mishnah, who is the guy who becomes a Nazir inside of the Beis HaKvaras. So here's what we know about him. Sounds like what we know about him is, number 1, the Neder Nazirus is Chal. Aleph, that's number 1. Number 2, the count does not begin until when? Leaves the cemetery and undergoes 7 days of purification process. But day number 7 counts as day number 1. Is he chayiv a carbon? No carbon. The outstanding shaila is he chayiv giluach? Right? Does he have to go ahead and cut his hair? It sounds like based on what we're seeing over here in the Gemara, that the answer to that is no. I'll say a few more lines, then we'll stop for today. So Tashma, I'll say, is this not Olam Haba? If there is a Keurig, that's the only thing that could be a little bit better, right? Simcha, can we sponsor like a coffee station in the Ma'ara? Is that too chol?
We have a little oil downstairs.
Little oil downstairs. Oh, right, on the way up. Okay, good. So we'll say, Signal goes weiter. Yeah, that would be good. All right. Oh, you hear? Right. This is cool neshama. So Tashma, we'll say a little weiter. Ainli ella yimei tumaso. She'in onlo min aminyan. So we'll say, I only know that the days of Tumah do not go ahead and count as part of the minyan. Yimei chiluto minay. So we'll say, so now we're introducing a new topic. Well, it's not a new topic. It's all together. We'll at least introduce this for today, then we'll stop. We'll say, if you remember again, we had this a couple of days ago about what happens if the Nazir becomes a Mitzorah. Like, you think you have tzaras, right? You think you have tzaras. So we'll say, if the Nazir becomes a mitzvah, so what did we say about tzaras? We'll say, does tzaras destroy the Yemei Nazirus? No. What does it do? It pauses it. Rabbi say, you remember we saw this? This is kind of like the case of concurrent Nidrei Nazirus, like the guy who says, I'm going to be a Nazir and my wife has a son, right? And I'm also going to be a Nazir for 100 days. Remember again, what was the halacha? He begins his Nidrei Nazirus, then what happens? Pauses, observes the Nidrei Nazirus once his son is born, and then resumes. So in that same discussion of pausing, we had what we called Yemei Chiluto. Those are the days when you are a bona fide Mitzorah. So if you're a Mitzorah, your Tzaras does not go ahead and destroy the Nazirus, but it pauses it. So watch this. So Tashma, Ein li Eli Yemei Tumaso, She'ein Olmo Min HaMinyan. I don't know the days of Tumah do not count as part of the Minyan. I will say, now, what is the Gemara quoting over here? The Gemara is quoting the Mishnah. The guy who becomes a Nazir in the cemetery. So what's the halacha? All of the days of his tumah, which are the days that he spends in the cemetery, as well as his 7 days of purification, do not count as part of his neder nazirus. Yemei chiluto minayin. How do I know that the days of his saras, the days that he is a confirmed mitzorah, ultimately don't go ahead and count as part of the nazirus? V'dinu, it's a kavachomer. Mahu yemei tumaso megalechu maybe karban. On the days of his tumah, he takes a haircut and brings a karban. So too, after his saras, he has to go ahead and take a haircut and bring a karban. And just like the days of his tumah, ultimately again do not count as part of the minyan or as part of the number. Ultimately, again, the days of his saras ultimately don't count part of the minyan as well. Lo im amrat. So that's what the Gemara ultimately is suggesting. That ultimately, just like at the end of Tsaras, or at the end of Tumah, there's a haircut and there's a karban, and they don't count as part of days of Tsaras, so too by Mitzorah, ultimately again, they don't destroy the days of Nazirus, but they also don't go ahead and count as part of it as well. To which the Gemara says the Kavachomer is not a good Kavachomer. Why not? Lo. Im amrat bimeitum also shekem mevatel bahenas hakodmin. I will say, here's the difference. Tumah, what happens with Yimei Tumah when Nazir becomes Tameh? That destroys all the previous days. Lefichach ein olam min haminyan. Therefore, they do not count as part of the days ultimately of Nazir. Tomar bimei chiluto, but ultimately again, Chavra, you know what? We'll move over. Chavra, just move over a little bit. So says the Gemara, we're almost finished. So says the Gemara, ladies, I'm sorry. Zev, we're going to be finished in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. We'll be finished in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, Lefichach ein olam min haminyan, tar mechiluto. So say, when it comes to Yemei Tumah, so you know why they don't count as part of the minyan? Because forget about counting as part of the minyan. What do Yemei Tumah do? They destroy everything before it. But Tomar b'mei chiluto she'ena mevatel es hakodmin. But I will say b'mei chiluto, the days of Tsaras, when the Nazir becomes a Mitzorah, what's the impact of that on the days before? Nothing. So therefore, lefichach olam lo min haminyan. Ultimately, again, they should go ahead and count as part of the minyan as well. It's part of the minyan as well. So we'll say, I'm gonna leave you on this cliffhanger. I know, it's going to be difficult to go on for the rest of the day. But I'm going to leave you on this cliffhanger with this piece of Rabbi say. So again, just the question we're kind of leaving off with over here is halacha l'maisa. So again, the bigger question we had was halacha l'maisa, is there taglachas for this tamei shenazar? Now Rabbi say ultimately again, what it transitioned into is in general, the days of chilutin, the days of chalat of mitzorah, I understand, we assume that halacha l'maisa, they shouldn't count as part of the Nazirus. The Gemara is now challenging that because there's a fundamental distinction. The days of Tumah, well, you know why they don't count? We'll say, why don't the days of Tumah count towards Saras? Why not? Because they destroy and nullify everything before it. But Yemei Chiluto, which don't destroy that which came before it, perhaps should actually count. So we'll end off with that question for today. And I will say, we're going to keep you just a few more minutes. How can we leave here without doing Mesilas Yesharim? And then Amir Hashem will go on for breakfast. You can even leave it. You can leave it. All right, Chaba, let's go a little Mesilas Yesharim. Little Mesilas Yesharim.